So, folks, we're back with another Iksar AMA, which means we've got some insights and thoughts into the world of Hearthstone from one of its lead devs. And big shout out to Iksar as always for doing this. But let's go ahead and jump into some of the interesting topics. So, up first, I think we'll talk about Tickatus. This is a common concern after the nerf teases were revealed that Warlock wasn't getting a nerf or balance change. A lot of people want Tickatus to go away. I think I kind of want Tickatus to be pulled back a little myself. I have a ton of fun playing him, but I recognize how unfun he can be for other people. I talked about this a ton recently on the Angry Chicken podcast, so I'm going to not get too in-depth on it here, but basically Iksar breaks down, there've been a lot of cards like this that generate a ton of feelings from both perspectives. One person's really enjoying it, the other person's hating it. Mentioning Shutterwalk specifically as a pretty prime example of that phenomenon. And Shutterwalk, I think, was like Tickatus times a million, frankly. So much more unfun to play against, but I think Tickatus still captures a lot of that same vibe as Dean has identified here. He says there is some difference between ranked brackets. People at high level play don't care about Tickatus at all because Control Warlock's not good enough to make an impact on the meta. But people in lower tier ranked brackets see Tickatus a lot because both Control Warlock is more competitive and more popular. So Tickatus is probably more frustrating for a more casual part of the player base. Dean goes on to say, Tickatus isn't a huge population card. Most of the games it plays, it loses. And even in the games the deck wins, it doesn't always get played. The reason bad decks see high play rates is because people love them so much they're willing to sacrifice win rate. There is some upside to having decks like that around. My one concern is that we really don't want it to be the best way to play, but Control Warlock outside of Tickatus is pretty fun and healthy, meaning that I wouldn't want Tickatus existing to stop us from promoting power in Control Warlock in future sets. If that happens, we would probably nerf Tickatus to give us some room to build more powerful pieces rather than be scared of it. So basically, Dean here is acknowledging that Tickatus has some play patterns that make people unhappy, and the feels are negative in many cases on the receiving end of a Tickatus. But if the population remains low and it's not that commonly seen, he's okay to tolerate some of those bad feels in exchange for the good feels. I've argued that I think the bad feels are probably more significant than the good feels, and a Tickatus that was less harmful would still be enjoyable. Dean has a slightly different perspective, which, hey, that's totally fine. We all think about things differently, and he certainly has way more data than I do to guide those decisions. So I'm more than happy to accept that explanation. And beyond that, I really do like this forward-looking aspect of it. It's like, look, if we want Control Warlock to be relevant and we want to print some cards for it, and Tickatus is holding us back because we think that population increase makes Tickatus even more frustrating and exposes those problems even more, then we'll nerf Tickatus. And you know what? I'm happy with that. That's satisfactory to me. Control Warlock is losing momentum a little bit as people figure out better and better decks, and that means Tickatus is less and less relevant all the time. And that's probably okay as long as that doesn't shift directions, and they say they're ready to account for that if that does perhaps shift directions. So I am pretty content with this explanation for Tickatus for now. This was a good perspective for sure. So Tickatus not nerfed today, not nerfed this week. Certainly, maybe not even this expansion cycle, but in the future, definitely still something on their list. So this is a question a lot of people I think were thinking about. Blizzard had teased Shadow Priest is returning. And then we got the expansion Forge of the Barons. There's like no Shadow Priest cards. Of course, we got Shadow Form back in the core set, but even that's like a shadow of its former self, hey. And there's nothing Shadow Priesty happening at all. So somebody asks, hey, what's up with Shadow Priest? Dean says, we'll have support for shadowy feeling decks. It just won't be in every expansion, just like no archetype is every expansion. So I think the tease was just a little early or a little misplaced perhaps, or maybe they were just talking about Shadow Form specifically, and we all kind of concluded like, ooh, Shadow Priest. And it didn't quite go that far. Even here, I feel like this tweet's like kind of pulling back a little bit. He says shadowy feeling decks, which doesn't really say like we're building into Shadow Form specifically. It's just more that there will be maybe some decks that are like perhaps damage based or, just literally using shadow artwork or shadow type spells as opposed to like holy type spells. So who knows what exactly we're going to see for Shadow Priest, but at least there's a tease here yet again that maybe some Shadow Priest stuff will appear, if perhaps not exactly what we were all expecting. All right, so this next question's pretty interesting. It's based on the premise that if you didn't hear, Battlegrounds is getting a new minion type. It's probably like a month or two away. The next .2 patch, I think. And it's going to be Quill Boars, and they're going to have a minion type Quill Boars. And we have like Quill Boars in normal Hearthstone, which aren't getting the minion type Quill Boars. But even beyond that, like every minion in Hearthstone could theoretically have a minion type, right? You could have undead and you could have human and gnome and whatever else, right? Everybody could have their minion type. Why don't all cards have minion types? This is particularly relevant when we look at spells, just got spell schools. And we classified all the spells, or not all, but most of the spells, a lot of the spells with types. Why can't we do the same thing with minions in the future? Is there a reason that doesn't happen, etc.? Indeed says this is brought up a bunch internally, but there is some thought among the team. They should only introduce text if there's a gameplay reason for it. If Quillboar doesn't play any differently than any other minion type and we have no plans or needs to make a Quillboar deck, it's reasonable to ask what is the upside of introducing something else a player thinks they should pay attention to. On the flip side, I think players like the idea of minion types and it helps the world feel more vast. MTG makes everything a tribe, and Rosewater has written a couple pieces talking about the benefits of having mini tribes, even if they aren't totally distinct from other tribes. So this is interesting, right? Like, I actually agree with this. Like, I don't think we need all human cards to have a human tag. It just seems pointless to me. Like, we can kind of tell they're humans from the artwork. It's fine if it happens to, I guess. It doesn't bother me. I don't think there's like complexity in the text itself being on the card. But I do find this interesting because they just did this with spell schools where they introduced text on a billion cards that are spells with spell schools. And for a vast majority of them at the moment, at least, it doesn't really matter what the text is. There are only a few existing synergies. There are certain cards, classes, archetypes that don't ever interact with the spell school text at all. You don't care at all that your spell is a fell spell, for instance, and only a handful of cards do at the moment. Now, of course, that's probably going to change over time. We're going to see more and more spell school synergy stuff start to exist and get printed, and it will feel substantiated that those spell schools exist. But they still did pull the trigger on this one and make this enormous change when there's only a limited amount of gameplay reasons to do it. So it's intriguing to hear kind of two sides to this a little bit. Like, well, we don't necessarily want text on minions for types, but spell types are a thing we're doing. So I don't know, maybe this opens the door for more minion types in the future. If not, across the entire set, kind of retroactively updating them, maybe just one or two limited ones. So this is an exciting little tease and something I've been talking about forever. And the question is, if you consider making a customizable game mode. Dean says, I'd like to. Our live content lead, Pat Nagel. Yes, that dude is why Nat Pagel is named what he is really excited about the idea of UGC, or user-generated content. It's not on the list of things we're working on, but there are many people who think that it's something we should be doing better at our company in general. And I couldn't agree more. I would absolutely love a sandbox mode for Hearthstone where we can go in, set rules. I mean, even if you got like custom cards and stuff, oh my God, can you imagine how insane and awesome that would be? And I do agree that Blizzard has fallen behind the times a little bit compared to other companies. Think about how often mods and mod communities have generated like entire genres of games and all kinds of huge hits. Think back to the days of Warcraft 3. That was like a huge portion of the game's success, and it has since been really abandoned at Blizzard. I think Overwatch has some stuff you can mess around with and do, but I would absolutely be thrilled for that in Hearthstone. Imagine all the cool like tournaments and game states and scenarios you could unlock with the ability to control some variables in Hearthstone. Sign me up for this one. Unfortunately, not being worked on now, but at least there's an inkling there, and maybe the next 5 years is something we could actually see in Hearthstone. Okay, so this next one, referencing, I guess, a Firebat tangent about early snowball cards that win the game when drawn early, but feel bad if drawn late. Lunacy, Undertaker, Keleseth, Sword of the Fallen. I'm not actually sure I think Sword of the Fallen fits in that list. I think it's still decent a little later in the game. Maybe not, turn 12 or something. But anyway, the question is, are those cards healthy for the game? Do they create too many issues? And Iksar says, I would think about the other extreme. What if all the cards felt the same no matter what turn you drew them? Leveling the play experience so there are no highs and no lows is not a goal. It can be dangerous as a designer to fine-tune your game until there's nothing interesting left. I do understand the sentiment, though. We try not to make Keleseths. When we do, we'd like for them to not be the most powerful way to play. Lunacy is a violation of that, and I don't think it'll be around for long. We're pretty sure Lunacy is getting nerfed next week. Just have to be aware of the extremes. Is Undertaker okay? Probably not. That's why we nerfed it. Is Flame Imp okay to be way better on turn 1 than any other turn? Does it snowball? The answer is yes, and just less extreme. So some insights there into how they're thinking about these cards. I mean, I tend to agree with Dean. I don't even know if that disagrees with Firebat's points, though. I'm sure Firebat would agree with this sentiment as well. It's just, the variance is good. You want cards to feel different. You want games to feel different. You want games to have, some highs and some lulls and some back and forths, right? You don't want this totally flat experience. It's just when those highs go way too high that it's a problem, and that's what Dean's acknowledging here. So limiting the spikes and the peaks in that roller coaster of a Hearthstone game, I think, should be the goal. And finding that balance is sometimes tough as long as we make those changes quickly, which I guess they're gonna be a little slow this time. I think Lunacy's could have been nerfed this week, but hey, 2 weeks out is still pretty fast in the scheme of Hearthstone compared to the old days. So thanks, Blizzard, for the Lunacy nerf. So next up here, what's happening with Classic mode? Is it going to get new expansions? So like, is Naxxramas going to be added in? And then Goblins versus Gnomes, and then Blackrock Mountain, and then what's next? TGT, and then what's after that? League of Explorers? Then, I don't know. I can't remember the orders anymore. But anyway, they're going to let it be for a while, at least a full expansion cycle. If people are clamoring for us to release Nax, then maybe they'd be down for that. Haven't made set in stone plans yet. There are also some questions there like, does Nax come out like with Undertaker totally busted? Do you replicate that experience? I don't even know if that'd be very fun. Undertaker Hunter being incredibly dominant for a few months would be lame, but I'm kind of cool with the idea of them taking a slower pace to the classic expansion than the OG Hearthstone pace had. In other words, if Naxxramas came out 4 months after a release, and I'm making up that date, but you get it, maybe like 6 to 8 months or something for classic. In other words, not running like parallel to the old experience, but parallel with a little bit of a delay or slowdown, so people can really sort of sit in each of these metas and enjoy them for people who do enjoy that. I'm not playing a ton of classic, but I don't want to steal these experiences away from people too long. You could also maybe have people like select the era. That's a UI challenge, I'm sure, but some people probably want like pure classic and only classic and don't want Naxxramas, so you're stealing away classic mode from them a little bit. Other people probably want to relive the Hearthstone experience over time. So maybe having 2 tracks, one where it's always classic, and then like classic plus or whatever, where you advance would be cool. I have a feeling though, from a UI and player experience standpoint, Blizzard might avoid that one, but I think that would be the best case scenario. All right, so next up is a little discussion here on cosmetics, and it says, are you planning on releasing more cosmetics than last year? Dean says, a lot more cosmetics. The pipeline is ramped up significantly, and we'll keep adding more options. Want to explore new versions of cosmetics too. No details yet, though. So we already got diamond cards. I think most people like diamond cards. I'm still not totally in love with diamond cards. But I think we may have another discussion point there as well. Maybe I can find that right now and just pull it up. Hold up. Give me 2 seconds. I don't know if I have that. But basically, Dean talks about in one of the AMA answers that they're thinking about doing alternate art for diamond cards that better fits the diamond animation. Right now, they were kind of retroactively taking artwork and just making it fit diamonds. And I think that's why it looks a little staticky and robotic to me. But it sounds like in the future, they're going to be customizing the artwork specifically for diamond cards, which I have a feeling will make it look way more dynamic and fluid and natural than the diamond cards we get today. I wish I had that tweet up here somewhere, but I'll link all this in the description below so you can go find the rest of that. But anyway, not only diamond cards, apparently new cosmetics beyond that as well. So I don't know what that means. Board manipulations is something we see a lot in Runeterra, for instance. So maybe that's the direction they're going to go, where you can tweak your board. I'm nervous about that a little bit. I kind of like the purity of the Hearthstone board. I feel like sometimes when I look at Runeterra games, and by the way, I'm not a Runeterra hater. I really like Runeterra. But I feel like sometimes the board state is like, it's just too crazy because it's split in half. Of course, your opponent's is something wild and wacky, and yours is something wild and wacky. And it actually reduces visual clarity just a little bit in the game. So I don't know. I'll feel pressured as a streamer to showcase cool boards if that happens. But also, I worry it's going to make the game a little bit less visually interesting and compelling, because complexity sometimes goes the wrong way and makes it harder to look at as opposed to just nice and tidy. So who knows what we'll get? It may not even be boards. It might be toys on the side. It might be fancier card backs. Who knows, right? Who could imagine what exactly it'll be? But I do like the idea of monetizing the game more cosmetically as opposed to more through cards. So if these cosmetics come in and reduce the need to sell packs because they're making way more money on cosmetics, that would be awesome. I have a fear, of course, as corporate entities want to do. They'll probably just do both. They'll add a ton of cosmetics and not make the game any cheaper necessarily. So we'll see. That said, Hearthstone has gotten cheaper recently. We have to acknowledge that. The rewards track is way better than what we had before. Everybody has a ton more gold. So I'm hoping that trend continues and cosmetics continue to supplement and supplant the need for people to spend money on cards themselves. That would be the dream state for Hearthstone as far as I'm concerned. Oh, hey, I found that tweet about the diamond stuff. Here we go. It's talking about they're going to try to do 2 diamond cards per expansion and maybe also retroactively make some for old expansions. It says we also actually had some issue making diamonds where the pose of the character wouldn't always translate to making a great diamond visual. Considering making the next set of diamonds, we make an alternate art that is commissioned specifically with diamondizing in mind. Fantastic. I think that's been my biggest hang up for diamond cards is it looks like they just chopped up the artwork and then marionetted it. And, you know, Samuro's like, nah, and Brucon's like, nah. Whereas instead of we had some awesome, sick, fluid, dynamic animation, it would really hold up to comparative things like Legends of Runeterra, Gwent, where they have these just like beautiful, fantastic card animations. So I certainly hope that happens. That'll make me way more excited about diamond cards. All right, so next up, interesting question here. This one's a little confusing even with the answer. We're gonna have to break this down. Drake asks, when the core set rotates, wild players will have to craft all the cards we want. And Dean says, if you only own the core set versions of those cards, yes, you will lose ownership. However, you'll get ownership of a whole new set of core cards. So just to understand the basic aspect here, this is something still a lot of people haven't understand. And the best way I've found to explain this is that you don't own the core set cards. You own the slot that the core set card is occupying. And for this year, right, we've got this slot of cards, and then those are going to rotate, and a new set of core set cards are going to come in next year, and you'll still own the slots that those cards occupy. You'll just get 235 or whatever replacement cards in those slots. So let's say, for instance, you've got Alakir, right? Alakir's in the core set. You didn't own Alakir before. The core set came in, it gave you Alakir. And when the next core set rotates, if Alakir rotates out, you're going to lose access to your Alakir. Some other new legendary is going to come in and take Alakir's spot. Let's say it's Kalamos. So now you have Kalamos on lease for a year, but you lose Alakir. If you want to play Alakir in Wild, you're going to have to go craft Alakir. He's not in Standard because he rotated. Now, there's a second layer to that, which are the new core set cards. The Malagos, the Ysera, the Talon, all those big, brand new, newly created legendaries and other cards that we got in the core set. And Dean doesn't really address this one necessarily. The implication here is that you're going to have to craft Ysera and Alex Draws and all that stuff for Wild. We've heard other mentions in the past from Celestalon, I think, specifically, that they don't know yet what they're going to do with the newly created cards, because that's suddenly a huge tax on everybody if they want to have to go craft Ysera and Alex Raza and all these other fresh core cards because they've never had an opportunity to get them before and they're not currently in packs. So how do you get access to these legendaries? I hope that they don't make everyone craft all of those cards to complete their collection. That would be a huge tax on me as somebody who likes to have a complete collection. Having to go make those like 29 new cards or whatever it was would be an enormous cost. So hopefully that's a distinct set that we get just for free because they were newly added cards. There's no way to get those readily available, and it would be a huge tax every year to have to craft them. But we don't know yet. I don't think we've heard official confirmation. Unless somebody can provide an update that I've missed or, final word on that in either direction, whether the one that Dean suggests here that you'll have to make them or the one we've heard in the past where they might just be given to us for free. I don't know the official word yet. So old cards, they're gone. You replace the slot. The newly created stuff, I think, is still up in the air, although there's some implication here. You will lose ownership of them. So I'll let you guys break this down, discuss what you think is going to happen. And if anybody out there has better information than me, please, of course, feel free to share that. So what about card buffs? This is something I talked about recently, like how if Mage gets Deck Lunacy killed, I hope we could get a buff to keep Mage relevant, like maybe Wildfire or some hero power synergy thing. And any chance we might see some buffs? And Iksar says, yeah, we'd like to first evaluate how any nerfs affect the meta before injecting a second variable. We plan to make a decision around buffs after the dust has settled. So, okay, dusts are in discussion. That's awesome. I thought maybe there'd been a bit more of a systematic change against buffs, and maybe they were moving away from the idea of buffing cards, but this suggests it's something they're still thinking very actively about, and we might see some cards buffed. We might see some archetypes brought to life after these nerfs have settled. So who knows when that would be? Probably take a month at least, I'd say. But I'd say maybe mid-expansion cycle buffs are a real possibility. And I love the idea of card buffs. I love giving a chance to archetypes that haven't quite gotten there yet. That you like the idea of the play pattern seems really fun, but they're just not competitive. And buffs are a good way to do that. Although, of course, there's some risks. We've had buffs before that have like broken the game. Things like Luna's Pocket Galaxy, which I'm sure Blizzard will be very careful about. But we also had some buffs I think were pretty successful. Libram Paladin got a bunch of buffs. Now, I know right now Libram Paladin's kind of crazy strong, but that wasn't immediately after the buffs. The buffs made it relevant, made it competitive. It's things since then that have driven it a little too far and made it a little too good. But we've seen subtle, successful buffs in the past, and I hope we can see those again. All right, so next up is a question about why the patch is taking so long. And Iksar says balance patches are pretty taxing on a bunch of individuals. Of course, there's a ton of technical stuff that goes into this. There's people writing blog posts. There's like actually, making the changes. There's just a million things that happen in patches. So I get it. Next week was what was planned for even before the expansion released, and the meta didn't feel like it was in a place where an emergency fix was necessary. In retrospect, I think mid-late this week was probably better timing to plan for. We usually know enough to make a choice after 3 to 5 days. Planning and releasing a patch on all platforms takes another 3 to 5 days. If we release on a Tuesday, the next time we'll plan on having a patch released by end of week the following week. It gives us the weekend to mull options and check out data, make a choice and implement Monday, release later in the week. That's cool. I think it has taken just a little long this time. Of course, in hindsight, right, we used to take months and months for balance changes. We've also had some, though, that happened immediately with things like Demon Hunter, which sort of implies that they planned Demon Hunter to be good and knew the patch needed to be ready immediately because they had that sucker ready literally the next day. They announced it like day of. It was so fast on the turnaround. So maybe they were scared Demon Hunter was going to be good. But he's saying, in general, a little bit faster turnaround on patch timelines would be nice. I certainly agree. I think this is stretched on about a week too long. People are getting really sick of Lunacy Mage. I think a lot of people have drifted away from the expansion, and that's bad. You don't want people turning away from the expansion when the time it should be the most fun. So the faster turnaround we can get on these, the better, and sounds like that's going to happen. All right, so I think that wraps it up for all the topics that caught my eye. There were actually, frankly, quite a few more. You're welcome to read all those in the link down there in the description. Iksar is breaking down a ton of stuff. That said, I'm always curious to hear your thoughts on all this news and more. What did you not learn that you wanted to learn? What did you learn that you agreed with or were excited about? What did you see that you hated and you're dreading and you're not excited about at all? All those thoughts and more belong in the comments. But until then, thanks so much as always for watching. And until next time, game on.
Yeah.